For what?
What up, Hyperchange? Welcome to another episode. Today we're doing something a little different. We're going to do a live interview about Tesla's Q1 deliveries. We got Tesla Daily here. Rob, what up? How you doing?
What up, Hyperchange? Thanks for having me, Gally.
Yeah, of course. Always great to have you on the show. Rob and I both put out videos about predicting Tesla's Q1 estimates, and we are so far from reaching a consensus. So I kind of wanted to just chit chat with you. A bunch of you guys tuning into our shows asked like, why are we so different? Usually we're pretty in line on Tesla. Thought it'd be a great opportunity to sort of just break this down and go through what we're expecting and see if we can come to some sort of middle ground here.
Yeah, so I think that's like a perfect microcosm of how this quarter is. Like the fact that we're so far apart on our delivery estimates speaks to, I think, the variability that there is this quarter and just the uncertainty in general with everything that's been going on from a macro perspective. So I think you're at conservatively 65K for deliveries for Q1.
Yep.
And
I can bring.
I don't love putting a number on it because to me there's so much variability that it doesn't really make sense to try to lock down on a number. But if I have to lock down on a number, I'm at around 88K. So that's what, 23,000 apart, which, yeah, as you said, that's probably unprecedented for us. And I think just shows how much uncertainty there is this quarter.
Yep. So yeah, I'm putting up on the screen right now my estimates. I was actually really excited to see this because Gene Munster as well also just came out with estimates of about 57,000 deliveries for the quarter, which is even lower than I had at 63,000. It would actually be a decline year over year. And he breaks it down in these interesting 4-week segments. So it seems like estimates are literally all over the place for this quarter. So I don't know. I can run you down how I got mine. I pretty much came up with mine as guesswork, to be honest. Like, I just assumed, like, I think the delivery wave has a huge impact on the actual ability for Tesla to get these deliveries out in the last 2 to 3 weeks of the quarter. And I think that got crushed. And so that's why, even though the factory was only shut down for the last week, I think the actual cars that were able to get to customers is going to be a lot more than, 8 to 10% of the quarter hit that was just the shutdown, if that makes sense. And so that's why I had so much impact. And I think production will be, a solid 10 or 15,000 cars higher, just because they couldn't get people their cars.
Yeah, I agree on the production for sure. For deliveries, then you're assuming mostly like logistical challenges causing delivery numbers to be lower and just basically inventory overhang then.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of people canceled their orders. I think there's just like a lot of like finance. Maybe you couldn't go to the bank to get your financing because the bank closed 2 weeks early. Or I just think a lot of like, it's hard to quantify what things, but I just think there was a lot of these X factors. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, where I started from was on production. Generally, that's the number that I view as more important. This quarter, I think it's a little bit different that deliveries are more important than they usually are. Generally, Tesla's supply constrained, so deliveries is pretty much just a function of production. This quarter may be a little bit different because of those challenges that you mentioned. But for me, where I started from production, which I'm curious to get your take on this, because I think this was something that you had some disagreement with, was on the Elon's tweet about the millionth vehicle being produced.
Oh, yep. I'll bring that up right now.
So, yeah, so I think you can pull that up. That happened on March 9th. So basically, I and many others took that and then just applied Tesla's production from all their historical quarterly reports and worked that into what they had likely produced by the end of Q4. And that number came out to roughly 919,000, 920,000, whatever the case may be. So that implied production at that point in time on March 9th would have been about 80,000 so far into the quarter. And then from there, they had, a couple more weeks. And if they had produced 80,000 by March 9th, that would be a production rate of almost 1,200 vehicles. So then you have another, what is that, 17,000 vehicles that you throw on top if they maintained that production rate at a linear rate from March 9th to, 2 weeks later when they actually shut down Fremont. So that gets you to 97K of production. And then from there, you also have production still ongoing at Gigafactory Shanghai and also ramping up. So maybe that linear rate even improved over those couple of weeks before the shutdown in Fremont for total production. And then at Shanghai, then you still have those, 10 more days left in the end of the quarter, which we've seen some speculation that maybe they're producing as many as like 3,000 a week out of Shanghai. I think that's probably a little high. So I'm a little skeptical of those rumors. Maybe that's, their peak rate for an hour or for a day or whatever. So I don't think they're actually probably there. But regardless, if you layer on a couple thousand there, then you're looking at production pretty close to 100,000 vehicles. So then I agree, they probably are. There's probably going to be a pretty big spread between production and deliveries to the point where maybe we're looking at 15,000 vehicles produced more than delivered, in which case then my delivery estimate would be like 85K or something, starting from that production as a base. But I think you're coming at it more from like the demand and logistical challenges because of the end of the quarter wave,
Yep.
where there's just, the end of the quarter is already difficult enough for Tesla to deliver, those thousands of vehicles, more than 1,000 vehicles every single day across the world. And just adding everything that's been going on into that already challenging circumstance can definitely lead to some shortfall. And it's just so tough to quantify what that's going to be. And I think that's where the variability comes in. So what are your thoughts on that? And then also I'm just curious on your take on the production, because I think you had a different number there for production.
Yeah. I think you make a great point on the production, and I think your production estimates are a lot in line. But I look at this as like, how Elon always says there's like these exponentials, and then it's like, oh, well, if it falls on this week, 1 week ahead or 1 week back could make a huge difference. Like that's
Yep.
why I think of this shutdown is like 1 week into this last delivery wave can make a huge impact. And so I probably think I'm a little bit too low on deliveries and production, honestly, because if my numbers are right, I believe your production numbers, like 90,000 cars at least, seems pretty reasonable. Although I do think they could have prepared for the shutdown a little bit and like maybe not have been building as much leading into the actual shutdown. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with that. And then what I think the real impact and where this all sort of normalizes is Q2. And that's sort of what I've been trying to think more and more, because when I think about what the stock's doing, how we're down big today, I think a lot of what's the market's factoring in is like, okay, we wrote off Q1's going to be a bad last 2 and 3 weeks. But now the question is, it looks like Q2 is really going to be super weak, because even at my estimate, that's super low in Gene Munsters. We're talking about basically flat year over year for Tesla, despite this whole illness impact. And so, but Q2 is really going to be where the year over year comparisons start to fall apart for Tesla. So I'm curious, I can put on the screen really briefly. This is what I was expecting for Q2, which is 60,000 deliveries total, about 2,000 Model Y, 50,000 Model 3. And basically what I have is, and what I'm assuming is that like everything falls off of a cliff, except for China starts to pick up the slack for decrease in Europe and the US. And then I think, things start to normalize in June is basically what I'm expecting. So I'm curious if you have any take on, how this will all unfold and spill over into Q2, because I feel like that's what the market's really going to be looking for now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the number for Q1 is going to matter if it's really low and it shows that Tesla has a demand issue or implies that Tesla has a demand issue. I think that will cause people to be pretty scared. And that's probably the most potential negative coming out of this report. And in terms of positives, I think really you have to look at either guidance or Gigafactory Shanghai sort of production rates, because people will use that to then look for, how's the rest of the year going to play out? How is Q2 going to play out? And I think that's obviously the market's forward looking. So that's really what's most important. Bad Q1 numbers aren't going to, people are going to be able to move on from that unless it presents, those concerns about demand, because that's one of the two most important things for Tesla in terms of Wall Street's reactions. Specifically, when it comes to Q2, it's, I think, the same situation. We just don't know right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. Personally, I expect Fremont to be shut down probably through April. Alameda County, the county that Fremont is in, just extended the shelter-in-place orders until the end of April, from, I think, April 7th. So while Tesla doesn't necessarily have to comply with that because they are a essential business, according to, I believe, the federal government, so they sort of, they could operate, I still think it places challenges on them when the county is otherwise in a shelter-in-place order. You have maybe not necessarily a ton of, the majority of workers at Tesla may not have families or things like that, a lot of younger workers, but if your kids are home from school, you have to either find someone to take care of them or you need to take care of them yourself. Things like that. Just little things like that, I think, add up and present challenges. And I think Tesla addressed that in the announcement where they said that they're going to shut down the factory, basically saying, like, it's really challenging for our customers, for our employees, and for our suppliers. So as we see these shelter in place orders get extended, I think it just more and more difficult for Tesla to operate, even if they technically could. So I think it would be surprising to see them reopen Fremont before then. I mean, Tesla's going to be probably as aggressive as any company in doing that. So I think we'll see them be one of the first to reopen. But I just think it's going to take a while. And then, if you're taking a third of the quarterly production away, that's, 30, 40,000 vehicles, in which case you could be at a production level of around maybe 80,000. And then, if there are demand challenges, certainly being at that 65,000 level is not anything crazy. The counterpoint to that would be that if they do build up inventory this quarter and they have maybe 15,000, 20,000 vehicles more produced than delivered, then they have that sort of as a tailwind to some extent, at least from available vehicle inventory going into Q2 that could help ease some of that in Q2 where we might not see as big of a spread.
Yep. And I'm curious how much this factors into your overall sort of long-term valuation and how you're positioning your portfolio with Tesla right now. Because, as a bull, it seems like I feel like I'm in this really weird place of, okay, so these shutdowns, as you point out, are getting extended through through all of April for it seemed like the major U.S. metropolitans, all of Europe. This is a huge source of Tesla's demand for basically the entire Fremont factory, and that could easily extend into May, into June, and then when the economy reopens, there's a very good chance that like it's not, that things don't bounce back immediately, like in
It's
China.
not just immediately the same.
Yeah. So, how
Yeah.
does this change your long-term trajectory of Tesla? Is it just they're going to be able to get through this and it doesn't matter? Or to me, it's like the unknown of all of May could be shut down, all of June could be shut down, and then like more and more things go wrong every single month. We kind of extend it, and it just doesn't seem like we have clarity that this is going to stop yet.
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely have been pretty bearish on the macro environment. I've talked about that on the podcast quite a few times, but I'm turning a little bit more positive. I think we're seeing some good data, out of China. I know people are a little skeptical of that, but even from Italy, case counts are coming down, or at least the growth in case counts is coming down. So it does seem like lockdown efforts are pretty effective, at least in slowing the spread. So the real question, as you sort of brought up, is like what happens if we reopen things and then sort of get a second wave of infections, and do we need to continue to lock down the economy? Personally, I think that we as a society, particularly in the US, I think we reacted really poorly. But I think now that this is, top priority, I think there's a lot that we're doing that's good. And I think a lot of medical and technological solutions can be put in place to keep the economy going. Testing is getting scaled up. That's probably the most important thing. I think masks, there's, conflicting guidance on that. But I think as we get, more supplies, more testing, and just a better understanding of how all of this works and how to treat it and potentially how to prevent it, then more and more things can open up. Like we can't just shut down the economy forever. That's not an option. That will cause more harm than any virus would. So we need a solution. And I think the US in particular, and other countries too, but is pretty good at working towards those solutions. We didn't react as well as we should have, but I think we'll make progress quickly in the face of this environment. So I'm not too worried about any sort of, 6-month, 12-month type of shutdown, anything like that. And I think Tesla's probably got a pretty good understanding of that from their operations in Shanghai. They shut down for 2 weeks, I think it was, which 1 week was already planned anyway because of Chinese New Year. So it was really not necessarily like a minimal disruption there, but compared to, what we're seeing worldwide and in the US right now, pretty small relatively. So I think Tesla's probably got a pretty good understanding of like how to operate in this type of environment if that type of environment continues for a while.
Yeah.
Like we just have to go back to work. It just eventually that's going to happen.
And China is a really interesting point because I think they're going to tout really good China production numbers as a part of this new release. And then China's been back up and running for over a month now. I'm going to show this picture. Oh, whoops, wrong picture. Of this phase two is what they're calling it, of the Shanghai Gigafactory, which is, I believe, the Model Y production line, or maybe the battery production. But even the construction expansion is back up and running. They're saying the factory itself is maybe back up to like 3,000 cars a week, but maybe that's burst rate. But I think in my calculations, like Q2, we could start to get meaningful gross profit that wasn't there in 2019 from Shanghai Gigafactory that will start to offset these losses should they continue. And I think that's a silver lining that is causing Tesla stock to outperform significantly in this drawdown. The stock's still way higher than it was a year ago, just crushing in terms of outperformance versus Ford, GM, all these other companies. And I think a reason that may continue is that even if we're still remaining shutting down, this China thing is just going to keep booming and booming. And eventually, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of cars from China. So I'm seeing that as a silver lining.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I expect Tesla to heavily emphasize that point when they do release this delivery and production report. I think they're going to want to, particularly Elon, I think he's going to want to tell a story of strength. He's been pretty vocal about this being something that, people are somewhat overreacting to, calling the panic being dumb. Panic is always dumb, so I think that makes sense. But he's been talking about the case counts declining and on the ventilator situation, saying they'll help, but it's not something he thinks there's going to be like huge need for, which is, contrarian to a lot of other people's opinions. So I think Elon is going to use this as an opportunity to also, show that they believe Tesla's in a strong position as well. And a huge part of that is Gigafactory Shanghai and what you just talked about. If they're at 3,000 a week right now, that's 150,000 cars a year. And I'm not sure when Tesla, that would have been like, 2018, that they would have produced like 150,000 vehicles for the entire year. So even if Fremont produces nothing, like it sets us back to where we were in 2018. Like it's not that crazy. Obviously that would be bad and that's not going to happen. But just to kind of give some perspective, like that's not, Tesla's still going to operate and Gigafactory Shanghai is going to be a huge part of that. So I think they're going to make that very clear in this letter.
Yeah. And one thing I think that Tesla has so much flexibility in that people aren't estimating, or that I've kind of been like, wow, we got so lucky that this didn't happen a year ago or a year and a half ago. Because I feel like Tesla's in this point in its CapEx cycle where they invested so much in CapEx for the Model 3 production line. And now for the past year or so, they've been milking all that investment and just it's been adding up to huge cash flow. And just that's why they have record cash on their balance sheet. And they did the capital raise. And it's like they were about to have this whole new reinvest in CapEx cycle with the Model Y. With Gigafactory Berlin, with Gigafactory Shanghai expansion, and they can literally just pause all those projects as demand pauses right at like this peak investment part of the CapEx cycle. And it's like for Tesla, at least, the timing could have never been better for this situation, for them to just kind of like put the brakes on for a second until this blows over, and then go right back into growth mode and like minimize that financial distress.
Yeah, completely agree. And that's why I think the essence of your original question here was like, what's the long-term prognosis here for Tesla? And, my thoughts as a bullish shareholder. And for me, it doesn't change too much. Like this is still a short-term issue. Yeah, it's longer than many of us would, all of us would like it to be, but it's something that we're going to figure out and we're going to work through, and, things aren't stopping. So, and to your point, Tesla's better positioned than any of its competition to work through this. And I think this is just going to cause even more strain on competition to be able to invest in electric vehicles. Like they're focused now on staying alive as best they can through this situation. And investment in electric vehicles, sadly, is not the best way for them to stay alive in the short term. So I think it's just going to cause more and more delays and less investment in new energy vehicles from competition. And as much as we would all like to see them, bring out good products and stop making ICE vehicles, it's just not, this doesn't facilitate that. And that just means Tesla's going to get further and further ahead. So this probably actually extends Tesla's lead and makes it even more difficult to compete. So yeah, long term, this is probably even, from a competitive positioning, something that's going to strengthen Tesla.
Yeah, and on that note, have you seen anything about Trump's new legislation to sort of roll back the emissions standard, as well as GM and Ford's sort of like leaked documents to basically be building way more SUVs and trucks in 2026 than EVs? Like, do you have any comment on that? Because when I saw that, I was like, wow, I can like,
Yeah.
I'm not surprised, but wow, you know?
Yeah, I definitely saw the headline. I didn't read like the full new terms or whatever. It's not surprising. I mean, they're going to use this as an opportunity to put those, those measures in place or to reduce some stricter things. That's something I've been worried about for Europe too. So we'll have to see if they make any adjustments. I think China's actually gone the opposite way. I think they're actually extended some of their new energy vehicle credits. Um, so we're just gonna have to kind of see how that plays out. But if Europe does a similar thing and they sort of like make it a little bit less challenging to meet the emissions requirements to give the automakers a little bit of a break in the face of such a challenging macro environment, that could impact Tesla's deal with Fiat Chrysler. Those credits that we've been talking a lot about. It's a couple $1 billion over the next couple of years. So if those emissions requirements get rolled back, that could be a hit for Tesla on those credits too. But yeah, on GM and Ford's plans, like, not shocking. I mean, we both did EV day recaps for GM, and it was disappointing for
Yeah,
sure.
it makes that EVD like, I thought we were being way too harsh, just saying they were like it was all hype, but now it seems like that was totally on point. So
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna show this deliveries chart. You guys should all ask questions if you have them, so we can get to them. Because I am seeing the chats come in, but this is the deliveries. So I guess I'll just leave this one up, which has these are my Q1 and Q2 estimates. This is so where are you at, Rob? This is what we have heading into the quarter, 110,000 last quarter. You're at about 88,000. Is that right for Q1, or that's kind of loosely what you're expecting? Is that right?
Yeah, but again, there's a lot of variability. I think I'm more confident in the production number, and then it's just going to be a matter of, how much of that production can Tesla actually logistically get into customers' hands. I'm not quite as concerned on the demand angle, at least as it relates to Q1. I think people that were purchasing in Q1 probably had this planned and lined up and financing in order before all of this really happened, especially in the United States, because it's really only been, the latter couple of weeks of March that things really started to lock down. So there is going to be a hit, and there are going to be people that can't take deliveries, and that end of quarter group that is just picking up an inventory vehicle. That's there are going to be fewer people doing that, obviously. So there will be a hit, but I think most of the quarter was a little bit more baked in than some of the more bearish numbers are implying. So all that being said, there is still a lot of variability, but I think it's just a little bit later in the process. And on demand, we haven't seen Tesla lower prices at all this quarter, which is kind of surprising because we obviously had the U.S. federal tax credit phase out. So that's $1,900 that historically, when those phase out steps happen, we would have seen Tesla sort of reduce their price by at least half of that. We haven't seen any of that this quarter, so that implies strong demand. And then Tesla also fought really hard to keep Fremont running. If they were in a situation where they were way overproducing to demand, I don't know that they would have tried to keep Fremont open as hard as they did and fought so aggressively with the county to keep that running if they had 30,000 extra vehicles just sitting there. Like, why would you not just play along and stop production for a little bit to catch up on, from demand perspective, on your actual inventory? So I think for those couple of reasons, I'm actually feeling more bullish from the demand perspective. And my main question is more on the logistics side as it relates to Q1. Q2, I think, could be a different story. I think that's when we start to see more of the economic impacts of this, from people losing jobs, or from the stock market falling, or whatever else the case may be. I think there's just a little bit of a delay in time for how it's going to impact Tesla. So yeah, Q2 I'm actually probably a little bit more bearish on, but again, a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. And I try to be super conservative with mine, like 65. I hope Tesla beats that. I'm surprised to see Loop Ventures and Gene Munster come in even lower, but I kind of want to just price in that shock worst case scenario, because that just makes me feel better as an investor to like model that out and mentally prepare for it. But I think, I'm a little bit more bearish than you on like, I just think this is going to impact every part of the economy. People are just buying less stuff. Tesla's going to be a victim to that. And I just feel like I've been seeing all these anecdotal evidence, like the rear-wheel drive for Model Y, a bunch of just anecdotal evidence, people being like, I either couldn't get delivery because the economy shut down, or I just canceled it because like I can't spend 50 grand on a car all of a sudden. Like things are just unknown. So I do think that's gonna have a really real impact. And actually, on that note, there was this one, we got a chat from this Kevin here. He says he's most interested in Model Y numbers, and I thought that was a good thing to discuss. Is I actually, that was the only thing I moved up in my estimates was Model Y. Is that I think it delivered 250, maybe they could do 500, but I think that's going to be something that, like, you talk about taking market share from an incumbent, you know, like the second the economy goes back, Tesla's product lineup's expanded, the Model Y is available, like people can order it. You know, if you're going to buy a new car, now all of a sudden there's a new electric vehicle, and this is in many ways their best car ever. So I feel like, you know, when you think about how Tesla's going to emerge out of this, it seems so strong because of that Model Y, and I think it'll ramp extremely quickly because all the production's there. So I'm curious what you think about, you know, the Model Y ramp and impact.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think that's like another big factor that I'm looking for an update on from this quarterly report. So kind of the three things I'm looking for are, does Tesla reaffirm guidance on the 500,000 for the year, or do they, give us nothing, or do they lower it? I think that's going to be really interesting, which we should talk about. Gigafactory Shanghai. So we talked about that. I think we both expect Tesla to pretty heavily emphasize, the progress there. And then Model Y. I think Tesla will share, hopefully the delivery and production numbers. And I think they would have shared what the production would have been in the final week of the quarter. But obviously Fremont is shut down, so we're not going to get that number. Maybe they'll update us on, what it was the week prior to that. But so on Model Y, you're saying you think like 250 to 500 deliveries this quarter?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I'm definitely higher than that. Troy Teslike has a Model Y order tracker survey, and he, in that survey, 170 people as of yesterday, I haven't looked today, put that they had delivery either happened or scheduled for before the end of March.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, so 170 people in there. I would be shocked if that was, half of Model Y orders were filling out. Not that it's like a random spreadsheet, but it is difficult to find if you're not active on like the forums and things, which definitely not everybody is. So I'm actually more around like 1,500 Model Y. And kind of the reason for that is, one, based on that spreadsheet, and then number two, based on the vehicle identification numbers, so the VINs. And the highest VIN that we have seen so far for Model Y has been in the 3,000 range. And obviously they're not going to, there's VIN batching. So just because they delivered a vehicle with a VIN of 3,000 doesn't mean they've delivered 3,000 Model Ys. But it does sort of put a ceiling. Like, we know there's not 5,000 deliveries, because otherwise we would have seen a VIN in the 5,000 range. So I kind of use that as a ceiling. 170 is kind of a floor. I'm sort of midpointing there, the 1,500. But I think, maybe half the VINs in that range being assigned is pretty reasonable. Maybe we're somewhere in between 1,000 and 2,000, but 250 would definitely shock me. 500 I could see, but I'm definitely thinking probably 1,000 plus for this quarter, which is super exciting, because in the quarter that the first time Tesla delivered 1,500 Model 3s in a quarter, that was like the very beginning of the strong, exponential growth, like that escalating part of the S curve for Model 3 production. So in the first quarter, they delivered 1,500 Model 3s. The following three quarters, they delivered about 85,000 vehicles for Model 3. So if Tesla does 1,500 Model Y this quarter, there's no reason this year they can't do, 85,000 or even more, because obviously there were a lot of challenges with Model 3. The Model Y should go smoother. So if Tesla can do 1,500 this quarter, I think there's a strong implication that, Fremont shutdown notwithstanding, setting that aside, they could have done 100,000 vehicles for Model Y this year. Obviously we'll have to factor some of that out from the shutdown. But if they're there already, that just implies a really strong outlook for Model Y for the rest of this year, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because they've been building the Model Y since like December or January. In reality, just before, when they announced the Model 3, when they really hadn't even started the Model Y, they totally played it way smoother. So yeah, I love that's another great silver lining. So actually, one thing you mentioned there is the throw out of guidance. That's something that I'm thinking about. That I think it would just be smart to do, which we've seen Apple, Square, GM, Ford, everybody who's announcing earnings is pretty much like, I'm scrapping all guidance because we don't know what's going to happen. I think Tesla's going to do that, and that is going to be the headline, and that's going to be why I haven't like been and the stock's still once again like double what it was a year ago. So I still think people just haven't understood that this like isn't. Yeah, it's a short term thing. Yeah, it's just seems like a month or two, but like I believe Tesla's gonna have to go back on their guidance, and the whole year is going to be pretty close to flat year. Is kind of what I'm thinking at a high level.
Yeah, I'm definitely more bullish than that. And I think it relates to Elon's perspective on all this. Again, I think he's going to come to it from wanting to show strength. And I think Tesla was being very conservative in their original guidance of 500,000 plus. And this whole macro situation was already starting to unfold. Maybe we didn't really grasp the full extent of it yet. But, that had probably some element already in their original guidance of 500,000 plus. And they said they could comfortably exceed that. So personally, I think Tesla could have done 600,000 plus this year without all of what's been going on. But now with this situation, obviously the number is going to be lower. That being said, I think because they had that cushion, Tesla is in a position where they could probably still reiterate, because even if they lose 100,000 vehicles of production, in Q2 or something like that, like if they just can't produce at all for, 80% of the quarter, then I think there's still sort of technically a path for them to be able to accomplish 500,000. It would be aggressive, but not impossible. So I did actually some research on this. Tesla has reaffirmed guidance in about 60% of these updates, these quarterly delivery and production updates. So the other 40% of the time they just don't comment. So it is more likely than not for them to give us an update on guidance. And I think with everything that's been going on, it's probably expected in some way, shape, or form. I think you expect them to lower it, and I sort of expect them to reaffirm it, just because I think they feel confident that this is a shorter term issue in nature. But that's all extremely speculative. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yep. We did get someone ask a super chat about just Solar Roof and Megapacks. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on those, or I don't? I feel like I don't have too much to say
I'm
on
guessing
that.
that's
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's like the commercial. They're selling them as like a combo pack now, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had much time to look into that yet, because I think that news either was yesterday or 2 days ago. But yeah, it's an exciting opportunity for sure. I think there's no reason, especially I think this whole situation is gonna heighten the demand for things like this, like self-sufficiency in terms of energy and things like that. So yeah, I don't know that I have a ton to add to it right now, but it is definitely an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, it's one of those businesses that I think Tesla's so much potential, but like honestly, it's not a material piece of the business yet. It probably got moved to the back burner and delayed a little bit because of this. Although I saw they were working on a huge project in I believe it was like Hawaii, and so I feel like that seemed like an exciting, that like they're bidding on something that seemed like $200 to $300 million mega pack potential project in Hawaii. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like 250 megapacks, like 100 or 810 megawatt hours. So definitely one of the larger projects.
So do you have any final thoughts, Rob? When are you thinking we get these numbers? And you're still at 88,000.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading around. Seems like a lot of people are lower than me, so I don't know. I mean, I feel a little less confident than I did yesterday when I put my video out on it. But yeah, I'll stick with it for now. What are you thinking? 65 still?
I'm still at 65, and I'm pumped. Gene Munster's at 57.
Yeah, it's going to be a super interesting report. We should get it tomorrow, Thursday, or I more expect Friday morning. There's only been once of the Q1 reports that it's come out on April 2nd, so more likely it'll be April 3rd.
Yeah, cannot wait to check that out. Everyone should subscribe to Rob's channel as well if you guys
Please.
haven't already. Tesla Daily on YouTube now. Oh wait, we got one more super chat here, Johnny B. Theoretically, let's just say this issue is pretty much blown over a year from now. Do you guys think economics will change on Tesla going forward? I mean, I see Tesla, I think they're going to make it through this. If anything, they're just going to be even stronger. Like, that's kind of my, these better products gain market share. Everything will get a pause, but when the spending picks up again, it'll only come back to these better products, and Tesla will benefit. I'm actually thinking that like GM and Ford might go bankrupt and might need a bailout if this continues. That's like one of my weird theories. So I'm curious to see how that'll play out in the Twitter sphere and like political realm right now. But I can just see that us getting towards that situation.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. Especially with I think there's going to be a lot of financial hardship for the other automakers this year, and a lot of them are already coming into the year. Like I did a video on Daimler, they already had like a bunch of these one-time things from emissions scandal, basically, that caused their earnings and dividends and stuff to be super low for 2019. And I think now again we're in a situation where they're going to have to do a lot of one-time thing here with everything that's been going on from a macro perspective. So it's just like you can't do those one-time things forever. At some point, it hurts you too badly and you can't recover. So yeah, I think they're going to shift investments, and I think as we talked about, that's going to position Tesla better from a competitive perspective than they've even been so far. And another point that I want to mention on this too, which I think is interesting, is that as we've seen stock markets fall, there's going to be a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines, and that capital is going to need to be redeployed at some point. So as people get more comfortable, and I'm in a little bit cash now. I'm sure other people are a little bit cash right now. As people get more comfortable and decide to allocate less from cash, more into stocks, that gets redistributed. And I think Tesla's in a super prime position to be the beneficiary of that redistribution, because obviously it's going to be even more clear in 6 months and a year and 2 years where things are headed. And Tesla's at the forefront of that from a clean energy perspective, and from an electric and autonomous vehicle perspective. So I expect a lot of capital to be freed up and earmarked for Tesla when things do rebound.
Yeah, and this is a little off topic, but you just brought it up. That whole like how clean cities have gotten, just that experiment like we're seeing of if you stop driving your fossil
Yeah,
fuel cars for like 2 weeks, it's unbelievable. So I feel like if when this settles down, are people going to look back at that science project and be like, wow, like electric vehicles are needed and they could make a huge impact ASAP if we switched. So I feel like that's a kind of another
yeah,
silver lining out of all this.
it is. It's super exciting that's been happening. Not for the reasons that it is, but just that we're seeing, seeing the satellite mapping of how the impact shows up. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to affect like the average day-to-day person. I think they're just going to be pretty oblivious to it. I think it's probably a lot of people that are already interested in the topic that are looking that up and being excited about it. And, the average person that doesn't follow, clean tech probably doesn't even notice or care. So I don't know that that's going to have a huge impact, other than maybe it does, you know, bring a little bit more attention to it for investors or for, climate activists or politicians or things like that. So can have an impact, but I don't know that it'll drive electric vehicle demand necessarily, just from like the average person.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, as much as we're guessing these numbers, I think it's also important that like we don't really care that much. That's like we're on totally different ends of the spectrum, but long term, our ideas are still like everything's still intact and it doesn't really matter. I'm personally thinking like Hyperchain is way over here, Tesla Daily is way over here, probably going to be somewhere in the middle, honestly.
Yeah,
but
probably.
but we'll see. And I think either way, it doesn't really like the fundamentals of Tesla being able to make it out of this and emerge really stronger than ever is still, I don't see any risk to that when the delivery numbers or the earnings come out.
Yeah, for sure. This is all very short termism. Like we're talking about what the impact is going to be over the next few days. That's important if you're trading. But if not, if you're a long term investor, you're just holding through this, and we'll get back to business as usual, and Tesla will be in a great spot.
Yep. Anything else, Rob?
No, I think that was it. That was a good conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody subscribe to Rob's channel. And yeah, we are both going to have a ton of coverage on this once the numbers comes out and with earnings as well. Thanks everybody for
Yeah, thanks
tuning in.
everybody. Thanks for having me, Gally.
Peace out.
See ya.